At its heart, The Hateful Eight is about two things: truth and lies. This movie is able to show the power of stories. In fact, almost every single moment in this story revolves around stories and storytelling. So from the very beginning to the very last scene, people are telling different stories to each other, and in most cases, there is spinning lies of deceit. What's important to remember is that the stories that people tell aren't exclusive to them recounting past events. An equally important aspect to this is the reputation that people have behind them. For example, John Ruth is nicknamed the Hangman because he will never kill one of his bounties. He would rather see them hang. As many people point this out, this makes bounty hunting much harder. This philosophy ultimately gets him killed. Jody's gang know that he has his sister in custody, and they know his reputation that he prefers to see people hang than kill him. So when they intercept him, this leads to his death. His reputation or his story ultimately allows people to understand him, which allows them to manipulate him, which leads to his downfall. Daisy also has a reputation to herself, which plays a significant role in the film. We are never told exactly what Daisy did to have a $10,000 bounty on her head. About 2 hours into the movie, we learn about the gang that she was a part of, and from her dialogue, it doesn't take a detective to figure out that she isn't the nicest person out there. But even though we don't know what she did, we still know that she has this bounty, and because of this bounty on her head, we still make assumptions about her, that she is dangerous and she is not to be trifled with. And as we learn later in this film, that was a good assumption to make. The same can be said about Major Mark West. Early on, we learn about his escape from L.A.B prison during the Civil War, in which he killed over 80 people. We also learn that he is a cold-hearted killer.
I joined the war to kill white Southern crackers.
So we learn this about his character, which really plays a significant part of his development and our understanding of him later in the film. So let's move on and discuss more specific stories to find the validity of them and the significance of them. The first story we hear is of Mark West's escape from L.A.B prison, and we have all the information to believe that this story is real. Many people have heard about it. It takes different people to tell the story, all working together to tell it. Different people react to hearing it, and so we are going to use this one as the benchmark for what Quentin Tarantino does to tell an honest story. The first thing is supplementing it with post-production. When he is talking about burning down the fort, in the background, we hear fire crackling.
We started pulling out all them burnt bodies at Wellenbeck. Seems not all them boys were Revs.
The story is also brought back up later in the film, and it's an important part of character development and construction. So when we look at this one compared to some of the other stories, we can see that they aren't all as accurate. But before we look at any other stories, let's try and determine who is or who isn't a reliable narrator. And in full honesty, nobody is a reliable narrator or someone who we can trust. Everyone tells stories to try and manipulate others, to try and succeed in whatever their goals are, whether that be free a prisoner, bring a prisoner to hang, or simply survive this blizzard. This movie is essentially a one-day period with a group of strangers. Some have met before, some have heard of others, but for the most part, it is a fresh slate. The audience is just as perplexed as to who the different characters are. There is no protagonist and there is no antagonist. There are definitely a group of characters who we like, another group how we don't like. But this isn't black and white. We start to like some of the characters towards the end of the movie who we might not have been fond of at the beginning, and the same can be said in the other way. We might have liked one character at the beginning and disliked that character at the end. The point being, there isn't anyone who we can trust for sure. Even the narrator, which is voiced by Quentin Tarantino, who of course wrote and directed the film himself, he isn't 100% reliable. And we learn that from name pronunciation. Look at how John pronounces Daisy's last name.
It's Daisy Domergue.
Now, listen to how Tarantino pronounces the name.
Domergue?
It's the same. However, when Daisy pronounces her own last name, it is different.
The Jody Domingray gang.
With Jody being her brother. I take this to mean if we can't trust the narrator, we can't trust anyone. So let's move on and look at some of the more significant stories in this film. The most memorable and most talked about story in this film is the interaction between Major Mark West and General Sandy Smithers, in which Mark West tells a story about Smithers' son trying to kill him. And it gets pretty graphic from here. I'm assuming you've seen the movie and don't need me to go into any more detail. The big question that is asked about this is, was it real or did that actually happen? And I think it did. The biggest reason why is that we see it happening. Just like we heard the fire crackling earlier, we have a reason to believe this happened because we can actually see it happen. Anyone can spin a story verbally and we have no idea if it's true or false, but in this, we actually see it happening. Some of the common refutations that you hear about it is that it's too absurd, but keep in mind this is a Quentin Tarantino movie and this is not the first time that something like this has happened. Another one brought up is that this is too much of a coincidence, but this is a movie about coincidences. By coincidence, these two people had their horses die right before the blizzard. 8 strangers meet at one particular location, most of whom know each other. The point being, this movie is full of coincidences, and this one doesn't stretch too far. This is the world of Quentin Tarantino. Nothing is too far. There's also a lot of contention about whether or not Chris Mannix is actually going to be the sheriff of Red Rock, or if he just said that to get a ride in the wagon and kept the act up later to have a power position. But again, I have a feeling that he was really telling the truth. In his first scene, he said that he was the sheriff when he was asked, why is he going to Red Rock? Not why he wanted to get in the wagon. Moreover, other people seem to know that the previous sheriff had died, so it would make sense that someone would take his place, and who else would it be besides him? Finally, when he's laying at the end with Mark West, about to die, he would have no reason to keep the lie going. But he kept the story until the very end of the film. Another story that people like to bring up is the Lincoln letter, and at least in my opinion, there should be no question as to whether or not this is 100% fake. Mark West says it's fake. He also gives his reason on why it's fake, and most importantly, at the very end when he is lying there dying, he jokes around with Chris about the letter, accepting that it is fake. Finally, the story about the 15 men who are part of Jody's gang is also a lie, a desperate bluff to try and live by Daisy. Well, the movie ends before we see anything that can officially confirm or deny these people's existence. We never see any proof, and if they had made it all the way up to the cabin, then we probably would have seen a pretty cool shootout, and Tarantino is the last person on Earth to try and skip a shootout. Let's look at why this movie is set up this way. The first reason is that it places the audience in with these characters. In most movies, there is a character to help guide us through the world, but in this movie, there isn't anyone to help us out. There isn't a character in particular that I was drawn to or that I liked at all. Because of that, it allows the viewers to form their own interpretations of what's happening. One person viewing the Hateful Eight is entirely different than someone else viewing it, and I think that's really great. But hypothetically, even if everyone was lying or everyone's telling the truth, it wouldn't have even mattered. This is a movie that shows the power of words. No matter what actually happened, people will believe a good story. This causes people to manipulate others by lying. Whether or not any of this was true, the movie would still end with the same thing. Chris and Mark West laying there bleeding out. The gang would still be there trying to rescue Daisy, and no matter if any of these were true or not, the movie would still end the same way. Whenever the cast was asked about the legitimacy of these stories, they would respond by saying it was up to the viewer's interpretation, just like what happened in Pulp Fiction. Whenever anyone was asked about what was in the briefcase, no real response was given. Walton Goggins, who plays Chris Mannix, was asked if he was really the sheriff, to which he responded, quote, "I need you to figure out the answer and never tell me," end quote. So depending on what you believe, the movie changes meanings and significance, which may be part of the reason why it was so inconsistent with critics.